Today, I will read you a story by Jesse Charles Fremont Grumbine titled The Great Secret. So sit back, take a nice cup of tea, listen, allow yourself to relax as we embark on this literary journey through the forest together. Stories possess a unique power. They transport us to other worlds and ignite our imagination. We might entertain ourselves, but also find solace and wisdom. So let's dive into the great secret and uncover the treasures that lie within its lines and pages. George Gruelle was an artist, and a great one, if the world's judgment, that is, if the number of the canvases he sold counts for anything. But he had one towering fault, as his contemporary artists conceived it, one fatal eccentricity, as the critics dubbed it. He painted Madonnas. There was nothing extraordinary about his essaying so difficult a task, for his drawing was faultless, his coloring superb, his technique perfect. But whoever saw such Madonnas? They were weird, unearthly faces which haunted one, such white faces as might peep at one from the dark. This specialty so grew upon him that it was soon whispered about that he could paint nothing else. The fact is that after he won fame and money, he painted nothing else. One strong feature of Gruelle's Madonnas was their spiritual character. They grew upon one, but they seemed superterrestrial creations. As no one had ever seen a Madonna and only judged of her likeness by traditional descriptions and medieval paintings, none could weigh or measure the genuineness of his portrayals. So he let the critics rave. They were certainly superlative creations, even if the critics did condemn them. Superlative because as color dreams they were too ethereal to appeal to a commonplace realistic sense. To him, color was a form which revealed rather than concealed art, a diaphanous cloud rather than a solid body through which the soul shone. The fact is, Gruelle made the real ideal rather than the ideal real, and by so doing damaged his reputation, so far as human appreciation of an artistic production was concerned. You conceive the Madonna to be the godmother of the human race, he once said to a critic, while I conceive every woman to be a godmother. That is the difference. Your dogmas degrade your art. Madonnas, my dear fellow, are women, our own mothers, conceived in the divine essence, radiating the divine atmosphere. Though you do not look upon celestial motherhood as I do, believe me, it is more than an historical figment. Dante might have called his Beatrice a Madonna, a woman whose soul was apotheosized from human dust into the white rose of the Empyrean. I try to make the faces of the Madonnas faces in which passion and art are sublimated. I paint what I realize as the beautiful subject back, off, or within the deformed object. With Burne-Jones, I'm seeking the mystical within the physical. This explanation did not appeal to the critic who was trying to reconcile originality with the established traditions and customs, so he smiled cynically. Gruelle, your peculiar mysticism is essential to theology, but in art it is bewildering. Art is sensuous, not supersensuous. Your Madonnas are unreal, and that is why I condemn them. They are fantastic creations. So they disagreed. Some art critics, said Gruelle after he had left the studio, are like Liebersmith, the piano tuner who, though deaf, pretends to tune instruments. Their eyes are in their heads, but not in their souls. They see only what is material. That evening, sitting alone in his studio before the blazing fire, he looked over some of his old forgotten sketches and consigned them one by one to the flames. A dreamy spirit seemed to invest him. Had the critic been present, he would have heard him speak audibly to his paintings, as though they were more than the children of his brain. I had meant to keep these, my first efforts, but youth hopes and prospects, while age retrospects and dreams. I see deeper now. A Madonna is more than a mere conception. She is an ideal. Here is a youthful fancy, a Madonna I took from a Russian type. She was a peasant to be sure, but she had such large and wistful eyes and an adorably sweet mouth. But there is something lacking. She has an aquiline nose. That is vile. A Madonna could never have a nose like an eagle's beak. And throwing it into the fire, he watched the flames devour it, as though they knew his loathing for the imperfect. Now this one, he said as he held before him a lovable creature, a Parisienne, is indeed charming. Mademoiselle, your neck is very chaste and your brow such as might have graced Diana, but your lips pout a bit. That's a trick of the Parisienne, a defect which art must remedy. Besides, a nimbus would ill become so low and narrow a brow, though yours is white as snow and adorned with raven tresses. So it went the way of the fire. Here is one which pleases me, and his eyes feasted on the arms and neck. These eyes kindle in my soul that universal passion which men call love. Dare a Madonna do this? I believe my model was an English woman, and if I recollect rightly, was one who, as I said at the time, had a heart of a red rose. Hey ho, that is why I must consign you to oblivion. The red vibration is not celestial, I see that now. What's a face? A magic mirror. But where does beauty conjoin with virtue? That's a nut for the superman and woman to crack. Here, he added, is a German type. What a strong face. She must have appealed to me when I was in Berlin. You, my dear, would make a superlatively sweet mignon, but no Madonna. There is disaster in your eyes, and your lips are too human. You too must go into oblivion, for I fear that you might like wine better than truth. And this last one of the lot. I wonder why it is the last. Of course, someone must always be last, but why she? It happens so, our fatalists would say. That's democracy for you. Why, she's an American too. What a coincidence. A compromise? No, a composite creation of feminine excellences, the luscious fruit of a democracy and a monarchy. How queenly you appear, with each feature perfect. Methinks the head lacks poise. A Madonna must have poise above beauty, for how else can she center the ideal through her womanhood, and so let the perfect Son of Man appear through her perfect motherhood? She should love her beloved, not for the sake of the child or herself, but for the sake of the ideal. Alas, I must lose you too, in that mystery where all things of sense are forgotten, where forms dissolve into chaos. The fire devoured it, licking up the paint as though enjoying it. Gruel watched the ash crumble into sighs which made his heart ache. Soon his eyes became heavy with sleep, for it was dusk and the glare of the fire had died with the inflammable substance which fed it. The room was wrapped in ghostly silence and ever-deepening shadows which soon melted into darkness. Yet there at the hearth he slept, or seemed to sleep. He slept, but awoke to a consciousness which was a day to twilight. Suddenly, a light twinkled in the room, stole close to his chair, and disappeared. Mysterious sounds arose and then became bodiless. The room, wrapped in an almost opaque darkness, seemed astir with live things which, could they have become visible or even audible, might have told whence the spirit of his pictures had gone. When the clock struck 10, a form arose out of the mystery of the darkness and stood near the artist, making the room light with a radiance not of earth. It was that of an aged man with long white beard, leaning heavily on a cane. He carried under his arm a portfolio bulging with curious drawings. One might easily have mistaken him for the incarnation of Isaiah or of one equally venerable and patriarchal. There was a kindly, dreamy look in his eyes hid under bushy eyebrows. When the artist turned to address him, the old man spoke. "You are Mr. George Gruel, I believe, from Cincinnati?" He laid his burden on a camp chair and went on before Gruel had time to reply. "I knew you when you were a golden-haired boy sitting on your mother's knee. Though dead, she still lives in you. Her name was Mary, and you paint her because, well, you know people said that she looked like the Madonna." "Indeed," replied Gruel, interested in the fresh light thrown upon his work. "You knew my mother, sir?" "Yes, we were old school friends. You were destined to become an artist. I told her so when you were born. How could you help it with such a mother? She both idolized and idealized you. But I was not prepared to learn, as I do now, that you embodied some feature of her likeness in each Madonna you ever painted." "I," ejaculated Gruel, puzzled and astounded. "You mean—" and he wondered what he did mean. "Why, look," said the stranger, pointing to several of his canvases hanging on the walls. "There she is, if I remember her, true to life. The eyes and mouth and the nose, yes, and the serene expression of the face are hers. You must have taken her as your model. And the hair and forehead, no one who ever knew her could fail to identify her. To Gruel, all that he said seemed the wildest conjecture. "Why, she's dead," he murmured. And yet, as he began to synthesize the expressions of the different faces, he did see a similarity, almost a resemblance. This he dismissed as a mere coincidence, for he knew very well that he did not consciously insinuate his mother's image into the various types of the Madonnas that he painted. Was it, he asked himself, accidental, or an idiosyncrasy which heredity alone could explain? "Come," said Gruel, his curiosity aroused. "You interest me. I must confess that your superior knowledge and powers of observation enable me to now see what I should have thought impossible. I realize as never before that no son can forget his mother even though her likeness is effaced from memory." The old man eyed him strangely and shook his head. "True, and that is why I have come to you all the way from Egypt with these precious parchments." And he bent over to take the manuscripts from their covers. The artist watched him eagerly as, untying the soiled strings of portfolio, he fumbled among the yellow, time-worn documents. "Did it ever occur to you, Master Gruel," he said, pausing in his search among the manuscripts and looking up at the artist, "that mathematics has anything to do with birth, your birth, for instance?" And casting a sidelong glance at him, he again busied himself with the papers. "I never even imagined it," replied the artist. "How can that be?" "Let me show you." And rising, he unrolled on a table a paper covered with curious symbols, geometrical figures, and tables of calculations. Gruel seemed to see the parchment without arising. "You were born, I believe, September 22nd, 1861. "Yes," replied Gruel. "Just as I have it here," and with his long finger he pointed at the birth date written in red ink at the top of the document. "You, Master Gruel, are the proof of my theory. Even these Madonnas which hang on your walls attest it." Gruel was at loss to know what to say. The chart, for such it was, seemed a Chinese puzzle to him, and as for mathematics having anything to do with a man's birth, the fellow was crazy. Why, it was preposterous. "Birth is purely accidental," he mused with worldly wisdom. "It sort of happens, that's all." "Your birth, Master Gruel," began the seer as though he read his mind, "is not, as you suppose, accidental, but a divine event. How else will you explain your Madonnas? Births do not happen by chance, but are wisely ordained. Let me explain my science. Before you were born, your mother was informed by your father, who, by the way, was a man of superior individuality, well versed in astrology and the occult sciences of the ancients, when it would be the fitting time to have a son. In order to produce a certain psychological and temperamental effect upon embryological life, she did what he asked. She herself had once been a pupil of Chevalier de Lestrange, whom you remember as a successful pupil of Mesmer. He it was who, toward the close of his career, showed how the will and even a thought, if sufficiently charged with vital magnetism, could almost change the destiny of a soul. The fact is, so remarkable was his power that he dared even to prove that the criminal could be redeemed and made a useful member of society by psychic culture. In fact, he took two of the notorious criminals who had just been released from prison, one a forger and the other a kleptomaniac and drunkard, and by his treatments, for he regarded crime a disease, he soon caused the subliminal self to so assert itself that in the one case, the man's hand at first became so charged with a power to resist the pen that the poor fellow thought he never would again be able to even write his name, when suddenly his hand again became free, and incredible as it may seem, he had no desire to use it. At length he wrote, but though placed in a more responsible position than the one he occupied before he was sent to prison, he had been an influential man, he never did the least wrong. The experiment covered 10 years, and so criminologists pronounced him sane, that is, cured of his mental disease. A remarkable feature of the case was that even under autosuggestion, which both he and the doctor tried upon his mind, he stood the rigorous test and never so much as received a suggestion, which proved the power of the subliminal self to maintain its sovereignty under adverse or opposite material conditions. But with the other, it was more a difficult case, I suppose, suggested the artist. Not at all. The appetite for liquor was extracted, so to speak, as you would dig a nerve out of a tooth, but by the most delicate psychic and mesmeric process, and he lost the abnormality, that is, these criminal tendencies and the desire for liquors, as a snake that sloughs off his outer skin. The change in him was so radical and absolute. It is all very wonderful, replied Gruel, staring at the drawing and trying to find the head or the tail of it. Now let me proceed, Master Gruel. First let me impress upon your mind that God geometrizes. That is, he works through certain forms of motion which appear as geometrical figures. This diagram is a geometrical figure of the universe, supposing, of course, that a sphere or circle is the acknowledged symbol of deity. Life must appear to exist somewhere in this sphere. Where, when, and how it appears is the trinity of mysteries, which I will try briefly to explain. If it appears in space, it is space comprehended by this sphere, and if it manifests in time, it is at a certain moment in the vibration or action of the sphere, and if in a certain form, it is with a body which must respond to the law which fixes its place and rates of vibration. Every form of life is here, and if one has the key, he may know why. The ancients from whom I derived my knowledge knew that a child conceived under benefic planetary influences would have a certain career. Suppose he was born at a certain place, Bethlehem for instance, and at a certain time, say December 25th AD, a pure male child would be born who could not potentially and would not possibly sin, being above temptation and essentially having in him the divine spark or essence so fused with the atoms of matter as to escape the influence of Adamic adulterations or magnetic energy, called in occult science the power of the dragon or serpent. A moment, sir. I must tell you here that I do not believe in this claptrap called astrology as exploited by the fortune-teller. I demand science or nothing. Master Gruel, let me proceed without further interruption. What I am revealing to you is not astrology, but mathematics. Granted that the Christ was so born, you will perceive that with his mother Mary and his father Joseph, they conjointly formed the pyramid of life, the base of which rests solidly and fundamentally on the earth, but the elevations tower toward and unite in one sublime apex. The four equilateral triangles represent the four principles of the universe: spirit, soul, mind, and body. As the Christ was born, so mankind can be, is to be born. Now, Master Gruel, observe closely. From this point, which is on the earth in Bethlehem of Judea, to this point, which is in the heavens at the intersection of 10 degrees of Pisces and 10 degrees of the sun on the equator, Lower Egypt came up out of the water about 12 times 25,000 years ago. When this configuration of the earth and sun again appeared, Joseph knew it was the fitting time to marry Mary in order to conceive a God-child. You know the historical result. It was so wonderful, extraordinary, supernatural, men even today dismiss it as a myth. But it illustrates my point and embodies my science. That is what I mean by birth produced by mathematics. Your modern astrology is a rehash of this ancient science which construed matter into rates of vibration algebraically, expressing time, geometrically manifesting space. Need I remind you that, as the Christ said, every hair of your head is numbered? How could it be otherwise? As each sand drops from the hourglass, as each moment falls back into eternity, as each wave of the sea ebbs back into the abyss, so life is born out of eternity and re-enters it again. Spirits swarm to the earth as suns honeycomb the Milky Way or crowd the circle between Sirius and the trillions of systems of suns beyond, too far to be seen even with our most searching, powerful telescopes. And to think, Master Gruel, and his voice grew solemn and slow, we were not the least in the scheme of life. Nor were we forgotten when God swung the pendulum to our universe and said, "Live." "What a stupendous plan!" exclaimed Gruel as his eyes began to see a light dawn on the hitherto obscure drawings. "What are these stars which seem to encircle the golden center?" And he put his finger on the glittering asterisks. "They are the 7 planets, and according to the Chaldeans, they wrought a special influence or momentum upon each one born on the earth. Each sense and faculty, each organ and center of nerves, the blood and vital fluid, receive a definite vibration from them. Saturn supplies intelligence and reason, Jupiter the power of action, Mars the irascible principle, the Sun sensation and speculation, Venus the appetites, Mercury the power of expressing and declaring thoughts, the Moon the faculty of generating and augmenting the body. And these influences are distributed among the inhabitants of the earth by mathematics," said Gruel. "Exactly. In one it is Mars that rules, in another Saturn, and so on. Some find in their lives a dual or a triple influence at work, hence the mystery of the multiple personality, and so it goes. Often the 7 are fused into one, or a radical power is so blended as to incline the person to evil or good. But all receive these prenatal planetary influences from choice, and so are in a certain place at a certain time by their own wills. I dare say you're in Boston now because, well, you chose to be here, as it is the law of mathematics for you to be here and nowhere else. You are an artist because you follow a will which, though superseding, yet harmonizes with your own. You paint Madonnas because you were born at a time when the imagination conceived of motherhood in that divine form, and when your ideality found in it the object and end of art. And now, Master Gruel, I wish to impart my message to you, for I must soon return to my cloister in Egypt. Like your elder brother, the Christ, your effort to idealize art is foolishness to the world, because they cannot see nor understand what is outside of their geometrical sphere of consciousness. They are the human oysters, preferring ooze to sparkling ideality and scintillating thought, vegetating in the dark rather than living in the light. I tell you, your pearls are cast before swine. These automatons can talk, say pretty things, invite you to dinners, show you by course, jarring methods, a vulgar appreciation of your talents. They can even think themselves wise enough to condemn your creations, but as you well know, they buy everything of you but your Madonnas. That is your cross. Go on, Master Gruel. Originality is rare. Most talents run to uniformity and consequent dry rot, but the Western world needs you, even though you seem incongruous with her heart's desire. Be brave and paint what is divine. It is the bread of life. Art must triumph over matter, even as spirit triumphs over the grave. While Gruel was pondering over the discourse, delivered in a voice which to him seemed superhuman, he suddenly awoke. Turning toward the table where the old man had stood, and to the chair where he had rested his portfolio, and to the paper which they had been studying, he saw nothing strange nor unusual. The fire was cold, and only the darkness remained to haunt him with its chill and mystery. "How strange!" he exclaimed as he arose to light a lamp. "I must have been dreaming. I wonder." And with his wonder, this tale ends. I hope you liked it. I rather enjoyed it the first time I read it, and I wanted to share it with you. When we share our precious chosen stories, we invite others into our emotional landscapes, creating bonds that last beyond words, lines, and pages. I appreciate you being here today. See you next week. Bye.